Coles, Vice Chair.
Deputy Alex Curtis, panel member.
Deputy David Ward, panel member.
Constable David Johnson, panel member.
Deputy Steve Luce, I'm Minister for the Environment.
I'm Kelly Whitehead, Group Director for Regulation.
Kevin Pilley, Head of Place and Spatial Planning.
You have a number of people online as well, if you'd like to introduce yourselves, who are officers.
Sure, kick off. My name is Willie Peggy, Director for Environment.
Thank you.
Hi, Susanna Rams, Chief Veterinary Officer.
Mrs. Binney, Head of Marine Resources. Good morning.
Good morning, I'm Heather Ford. I'm the Private Secretary for the Minister for the Environment.
Well, Lizette, you're on mute.
Couldn't hear you, Liz.
Apologies, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Lizette Jones, Head of Environment and Climate.
Thank you very much. Minister, we have 2 hours and quite a lot of questions. So kick off with the Marine Spatial Plan. This time last year, you published your ministerial response to the panel's review of the Marine Spatial Plan. 1 year on, how would you describe the progress to date?
I think the progress has been good. As we will recall, the plan was very extensive, covered a whole broad range of everything to do with our territorial waters, under the sea, on the shore, but most controversially or most interestingly, I guess, was the section on fishing, and in particular the marine protected areas, where we are proposing to increase the areas that we protect from certain métiers of fishing, and in one case, increasing the no-take zones, where nothing is allowed to be caught. As you might expect, that was of great interest to the whole fishing community, both in Jersey and in Normandy and Brittany, because we share our waters with our French neighbours for fishing purposes. Most recently, we've had a number of discussions about that, but I think one of the significant things that has happened fairly recently is I published a time scale of how the plan will be developed. And part of that significantly is the commitment to increase the protected areas in November next year, well, next autumn, should I say. Alongside that, I made some changes to the plan as it had been originally published. I grandfathered, for the want of a better word, some areas where it was clear to me that certain French fishermen relied pretty much extensively for their livelihood on these areas, and I've told them that those areas can stay open till 2030. And I also asked the team to go away and conduct additional research on quite a number of areas where I wanted to be assured that there was something to protect. And the team have been doing that over the course of the summer. I'm expecting a review and a report from their work in November, so next month. And after that time, I feel I will be in a position to issue some new guidelines and some new areas, if you like. I would hope that we will have found some areas that are definitely in need of protection, and likewise some areas that may not be in need of protection from dredging and mobile gear. So that's the work that's being undertaken at the moment. We've had a number of meetings, and maybe Francis would like to speak to those, because those have been meetings that I haven't personally been present at. And I'm sure, I may as well say it, because I'm sure you will have noticed, we have recently had some engagement from French and Jersey fishermen who have got together to voice some concern about the way these protected areas will be rolled out. Clearly, they have had the information for quite some time, but have chosen to act now. And while I did attempt to meet them on Friday, the weather and timescales changed to the point that I couldn't do that, but I will engage with them. And certainly when we issue the new areas or the results of our research, I would intend to sit down with the industry to discuss those and see where we go from there, because I'd like to think, as I did originally, I'd like to think that they will see that I have listened to their concerns and taken their concerns on board and acted accordingly. But Francis, could you...
Minister, maybe I could just before we move to Francis, because you've mentioned that you published this timeline, and what I'm hearing from you is that it's still on track. You will be online to kind of publish in January, and for the states to be approving or not this final legislation piece to ensure that these marine protected areas are put into law. But now the industry is calling for that to be extended, to be delayed till 2030. I mean, do you still feel that it's right to push on to make sure?
Well, as I said, I need, there's a number of things that need to happen. The first one is I need to see the results of the research that the Marine Resources Department have done over the course of the summer into the areas that I asked for further investigation. Once I get that back, I'll have an idea of whether we're extending Grady, whether we're rolling back. I will then talk to the industry, and it may be, because the other thing I failed to mention 2 minutes ago was that we will also shortly be in receipt of some economic data and the economic effects of these closures on various parts of the industry. Now, it's clear that closing a section of our territorial waters to mobile gear will affect dredgers and trawlers adversely, potentially. But it may also be that the closure of those areas to mobile gear will make it better fishing for the static gear, so for the divers and the potters. So this economic work needs to be done, it needs to be understood as well. So that will be another piece of work which I'd need to see. But I think moving forward, my intention will be to continue to consult with the industry and to see where they are, to look at the economic data to see how badly or otherwise it will affect certain fishermen. And then I'll have to make further discussions. But at this point in time, my intention is to proceed as we have said. It may be that we may need to make some concessions depending on some of the economic data.
But would these concessions be related to the marine protected areas that you've already kind of designated? They weren't subject to that extra research or the known take zone or the grandfathering. So this is particularly when you're talking about concessions or talking further with the industry. You're talking about those areas that we need to work about the research.
I'm talking primarily about the research areas. I don't believe that no-take zone is something I wish to negotiate on. We've got very strong reasons why we believe the particular no-take zone we're proposing down at the Sauvage Reef, southeast of the Minkies, is a very important area for all sorts of reasons, and I don't intend to discuss that particularly. There may be some discussion around the areas that weren't put out for further research, and I believe the team in doing their research may have come up with some additional data on those areas. So while I'm certainly not saying everything is up for grabs again, because it's not, and the main focus will be on the results of the research areas. The grandfathered areas, I believe I've committed to those. I won't be changing that. I think that would be wrong to do that. But the main focus will be on the research areas to see whether they're in or out as we move forward.
Just a quick question. I just pulled this up online here. So there's a report just recently published saying New Oceania UK report shows that half of UK's top 10 fish stocks are critically low, being overexploited or both. 1 in 6 of UK stocks are in critical condition, yet still being fished beyond safe limits. Just what I'm concerned about is the problems are now, and I know you're pushing things out and waiting for research and stuff like that, but it's clear we have major issues now. Why are we not able to react quicker?
Well, we do react quickly where necessary, but I think the big differential I would make in response to your question, Deputy, is that in Jersey, when we protect areas, we protect them properly, we protect them with legislation, and we have the viaries to go out and actually do something about it. Many of the marine protected areas and protected zones in other jurisdictions are not covered by law quite so stringently. Mm-hmm. So while they may be protected, there's very little that some of these countries can actually do when they catch people fishing in them. Mm-hmm. But in Jersey, that's not the case. We've got the viaries, we've got the legislation in place where we put a designation on the zone and say it's a no fish or it's nothing, or you can't do this, or it's seasonal. the marine resources team have the ability to go to sea and bring people in, and we've seen quite recently a number of boats have been brought back to Jersey Harbour, and proceedings have followed very quickly. So we do have the ability to act fast.
So, Minister, I think thank you for that, and obviously you've talked about the Jersey and French fishermen who met this weekend, but what work are you doing with the French government to ensure that they also are supportive of this, our work in this area, especially as they also have signed up to 3030?
Yes, they have, and I have had discussions with the French Environment Minister. Back in May, I met her in Paris, mainly to discuss my concerns over the exporting of Jersey marine produce. But she has a difficult job in place, like many of us, where on one hand she is responsible for protecting fishing areas, and on the other hand is responsible for trying to protect the livelihoods of fishermen who fish in the areas that she may be thinking about closing with other hatchery. And this is not an uncommon difficulty faced by some ministers who take on the portfolio of the environment. But I think she appreciates that she has a difficult job to do. Certainly, I have spoken to her and she has made her views very clear about the closure of areas to French fishermen. But we have taken our marine spatial plan through our States Assembly. We've signed up to various things like Paris and others, and conventions, and OSPAR, which protects marine areas from certain endangered species. And it's quite clear to me that we need to carry on down that path. Now, I don't intend to do that without consultation and without taking the views of fishermen on board, and that includes the views of French fishermen. And I think the extensive consultation we did when we announced the protected areas shows. I mean, the French government, the French regional fishing associations and French fishermen all contributed extensively to that consultation. I took their views on board. Okay, I may not have gone as far as they would have wished, especially the fishermen, but I have taken their views on board, and the grandfathering of 2 areas to help French fishermen and the other concessions I have made clearly shows that I've listened and read what they have. I think they feared the consultation would be an exercise whereby we accumulated the data and said thank you very much and put it on the shelf and just proceeded without further ado. But that wasn't the case. We were very clear that we would listen, and we did. So we read their consultation, we made some changes, and I think we'll have to accept that moving forward, it won't all be plain sailing, if you pardon the pun. But the French fishermen will get some concessions. They won't get everything they want, in the same way that Jersey fishermen will get some concessions, but they won't get everything they want either.
No, and of course, well, you mentioned it before about the economic impact assessment that will be coming to, I guess, add to this discussion, because, of course, in the fishing industry, it's now versus these areas you're protecting are also nurseries to ensure that there are stock for the future fishers. So it's important to maybe show that in the economic impact assessment. But why is it taking so long for us to see this economic impact assessment?
Well, I may have to go to Francis for the answer to that. I mean, obviously, the economic impact assessment's not being done inside the Marine Resources Department. That's not their speciality, and I believe it's being done by the Economic Department. But Francis, maybe could you say something quickly about economic impact? And while you're there, could you just mention those 3 meetings you've had over the course of the summer, please, with French officials and fishermen?
Certainly. Thank you, Minister. The economic impact assessment is being done by one economist from the Economy Department, chartered economist, and one external chartered economist as well. Obviously, it's been booked into their time alongside other lines of work. We're also getting it peer-reviewed by Scottish Government, who delivered the best marine economic impact assessment so far. So we've got that to factor in as well. The simple fact is there is a vast amount of data for us to process. My team, in support of the economic team, in delivering understanding of the mobile gear activity, the static fleet activity, catches, profit and costs and everything else. And the impact assessment doesn't just look at that one aspect, the MPAs. It's looking at the Marine Spatial Plan overall and reporting on the whole thing, rather than just what's the impact to dredge. A small version of that report was done earlier last year, which was called the Business Impact Assessment, but this is a much broader document. So it's taking some time to get right, and we have to get it right because we're talking about financially valuing the impact to industries, positive and negative, of the Marine Spatial Plan. So we need to have really robust and well-checked data in there in order for it to stand up to scrutiny, both by you and the public.
And the meetings, Francis?
The meeting, certainly, Minister. We met with the in May, we met with the Quad Working Group, which is the 4 governments under the TCA relevant to this area. Also in May, we had the meeting you've alluded to with the French Environment Minister. Then in July, we met in Normandy with the French fishermen, both Breton and Normand, and their Paris representatives, with DEFRA and the EU in the room, but not really having an active voice. We gave a briefing at the Normandy summit and an earlier Brittany summit in the summer as well. Normandy MPs meeting. Brittany summit's coming up, I apologise. And we've offered another meeting in the autumn or early spring when next Normandy fishermen want to meet, and Brittany fishermen is likely to be January or February when they next want to meet. But I think everyone is waiting for the MPA research areas to be published and the economic impact assessment. Paris are also producing their own economic impact assessment. I don't think it's peer reviewed, or at least they haven't confirmed it, but I'm waiting for more detail on that, and hopefully it's publication in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Francis.
Thank you. And I suppose the next question is what preparations are being put for enforcement? So when these come into force this time next year, how do we ensure that they are being protected?
Well, again, we could go to Francis, but I would say that we have a fisheries protection vessel with a small rib on it for helping to board boats at sea. We also have a medium-sized rib in the Marine Resources Department, which can be deployed around the island at speed. And we will continue to do as we do now, which is to go out and enforce where we find vessels fishing illegally in our waters. We're helped a lot by technology, and certainly in recent months and the last few years, we now have the ability to track pretty much all fishing vessels which are in our waters. And with the aid of computers and AI, the computers can tell us when those boats are moving at a particular speed, which would be conducive to fishing, the type of fishing they're doing, or the tracks they use, or stuff like that. So we can use technology to help us, to alert us to what might be going on at sea. And of course, we rely on information from people who are at sea. So Jersey fishermen will quite often phone in and say, there's a vessel somewhere over there, I don't know who it is, it may be doing something, do you want to check it out? And quite often we're in a position to move quickly. And in fact, the most recent case of a French fisherman coming to court was a situation where our fisheries protection vessel was at sea some miles away, but was able to move very quickly to the area and take action. Yeah, so vessels, the transmitting devices they have on board now transmit every 7 minutes or every quarter of an hour or something like that, depending on the size of the boat. We're all signed up to that, and any boat that fishes in our waters has to have equipment in order to transmit.
Thank you. And 2 areas which I know you're Minister that you kind of push on within the government, but it may not necessarily sit in your remit, is the something that's mentioned in the Marine Spatial Plan is the onshore fish processing facilities. Is there any movement on that? Is there any discussions further?
So I think it's probably widely recognised from people inside and outside the industry that in order to move forward with an industry fishing industry in Jersey, we need to really talk hard about where we're going, what we're doing. And a number of suggestions have come to me in the last 12 months. Some have, and I suppose I have to say that none of them have really developed very much. I know Francis will have something to say, but certainly the Economic Development Minister and myself sit down or talk about this on a regular basis. I think we recently agreed that we really do need to take some action when it comes to coming up with a plan for the future of the industry. We know the species that we relied on historically, your brown crabs and lobsters and stuff, are changing. We have new species coming into our fishery. We need a plan for how we can maximise the benefit of those whilst running a sustainable fishery, because that is the most important thing, and at the same time having a fleet which is profitable and people can make a living out of it. But we are working up a plan. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, Francis? We've got some ideas of who we might ask to look at this work.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, we're working with the Economy Department again. We had a meeting with the main fish merchants and the head of the JFA a few days ago, again with the Minister for Economic Development, and there is a strong feeling of the need to work up shoreside facilities, but in a way that is going to work. So you need not only the physical structures, but also the social and formal business structures to make those things work. The fishermen fully recognise that if you gave them a really nice processing plant right now, they would make it look like a mess within 2 weeks, because they don't have the organisational setup to manage something like that themselves. There also aren't the market routes developed for those products. The aim eventually, and the thing the fishermen want, is simply avenues to find new markets, maybe small scale, for higher value products, and just to give them enough hope to get out and go fishing, because that's what they want to do.
Thank you. And I think maybe this sparks a point that I wanted to raise about the tuna. Next year, you do catch and release at the moment, but from next year, Minister, you want to do licensing to be able to, for those the fishers to bring tuna to shore. How are you going to ensure the maximum value will get out of tuna? There is special ways of handling tuna, and also from a marketing perspective, how are we going to make sure that tuna, that of course has been endangered, is maximised to the full, and so there isn't that situation where it's kind of loses its value for whatever reason from handling.
Well, obviously we want to follow best international practice, and we work under ICAT, which is the European global group that authorise this. The first thing we need to do is to get a quota, or a part of a quota, from the UK. We have to come under the UK on this. It's not something we can be given ourselves. So we are talking to the UK about how much quota we might have for next year. When we know that, we will then hopefully be in a position to say, right, this is how we're going to use that quota. And it would be my hope and expectation that we will have a number of boats that will come forward, and we will say to them, you are all authorised to catch a certain weight of fish. It won't be very much, maybe several hundred kilos, but you have to remember these fish are quite big anyway, so we're not going to be landing thousands of tuna, let's be clear about that. It will be a very small number. On top of that, it will be incumbent upon us to make sure, as you say, that we make the best of this. So we couldn't, for example, have a week of bad weather when nobody goes fishing, and then on a Saturday everybody goes fishing and everybody comes back with a tuna and dumps it on the slab and expects it to be sold within the local market. We're going to need to be a bit cleverer, a bit more strategic about how we do that. There is a market here. I really look forward to being able to see Jersey tuna on the menus in local restaurants. It will be done sustainably, so we don't need to worry about that aspect. But it is, as I say, really important for us to make sure that we organise the marketing so that the fishermen get a top return, the restaurants have it when they want it, and that we don't mess it up for ourselves by flooding the market for 2 weeks here and then nothing for a period of time, because the season's very small. The weather may play a part, but I'm very excited about the possibility of doing it right. And doing it right is important. The way you catch tuna, the way they're treated on the boat once they're caught, how they're handled, and especially what happens to those fish when they come to shore. All those parts, from the minute the fish is on the hook to the moment it gets on the plate, it's really important to get the whole thing right. because tuna are a very valuable fish when treated right. They very quickly turn into pet food if they're not looked after properly on the boat, if they're not landed, and if they're not, held in the right conditions.
And would this work kind of do this planning for a more wider sustainable fishing, which we've just talked about this onshore facility, or this wider sustainability? Because this is coming sooner.
Will all be part of it, but I mean, it may well be that the tuna fishery opens before we've got the facilities that we really, really need, but we'll have to find a way around that. But certainly, as Francis says, my hope for the future will be a facility on the harbour where fishermen can land any sort of species they like, but it will go to the right health conditions, the right specification of not workshops, but areas for packing, and we will have freezers, and we'll have quick freezers, and we'll have the ability to treat those products as best we can to maximise the value, because the added value is the most important thing here. And we've all had some ideas about how we can increase participation in local people eating local shellfish and local fish. And we need to play our part. And some of that will be providing the facilities on the quay and maximising marketing potential by freezing or what have you. And as Francis says, there's also a lot of work to be done about where we are going to send the excess. So are we going south? Are we going north? But from my mind, whilst there's always going to be a market in Europe, there's no doubt to me that the Jersey brand, whether that's Jersey milk, Jersey potatoes, Jersey oysters, Jersey lobster, the word Jersey is synonymous with quality. And I know any number of people in the UK who would be delighted to be selling Jersey shellfish because it's such good quality.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy
I just want to pick up on Francis Binet's commentary earlier about market routes. And it was just, I think a few weeks back, one of the fishers was complaining that they'd sent a load of fish into the French market and the paperwork wasn't quite right. And as a result of that, it all came back. I mean, some of this is around risk. And I mean, how are we managing some of this stuff? Is this Brexit related? Is it just awkward people in officials in France? I mean, because obviously, you want to process, and I absolutely get that because that adds value. But if there's this risk of you don't quite get the paperwork right and it all gets sent back, I mean, that's just of no consolation to anybody. So, I mean, how are we working to overcome some of this stuff?
Well, we're trying our best, and I can't pretend that exporting produce, aquaculture and marine produce to France has been easy since Brexit. In the months immediately after Brexit, we continued to export sort of as we used to, but the port of Granville became closed to exports, which meant we had to go to St Malo. That added considerable cost. It also added considerable complications with unloading because the boats were having to go into the inner harbour. There was difficulty as to whether the boats could unload themselves, whether they could unload to the fisherman's auction house, or whether they had to be unloaded on the quay. And more recently, we've had, I can say, sort of challenges from the veterinary inspection services in St Malo, who appear in the last couple of years, I guess, but even more recently, to take a more stringent approach than we have been used to. And certainly the case that you mentioned with a large load of valuable oysters which were returned to Jersey was because there was a single typo on the export paperwork. A lot of discussion happened very quickly when that was highlighted. We, from the Jersey end, offered to send down amended paperwork because obviously there was a mistake, however small it was a mistake on the paperwork. The veterinary service in Jersey offered to prepare the paperwork. We offered the marine resources vessel to take the paperwork down. We offered a vet to go to France to show and explain what had happened. But the French vet said, no, this is a mistake and the produce must go back.
Why is there not that more constructive working with the French? I mean, when it's such a major market, why are we having this tension?
I don't want to get into a diplomatic incident.
Sorry,
all I can say is that we have made extensive efforts to try to improve the smooth flow of exporting produce into France. And we have, especially in the most recent months, come up against some quite challenging interpretations of rules and regulations and laws, to the point where you go one week and it appears that this is okay, and the next week maybe they need another piece of paper or something else, and I don't really want to go into it. But we have got into such detail as the refusal of the authorities in France to accept Jersey lobsters packed in ice, because the ice has not been, the water used to make the ice does not come with paperwork to say what it is. So, I mean, things are getting quite difficult, I have to say. I have spent my time in office working hard on trying to get Granville reopened as an export port for aquaculture, in fact, for all fisheries products, and I continue to do that. I'm having meetings on a regular basis where I press that case. I believe the island has made a number of concessions to the French fishing industry since Brexit. We've had 5 years of conceding here, there and everywhere, but despite that, we still do not find that Granville is open, which is something we've asked for in all that time. And the main reason I went to see the Environment Minister in Paris in May was to stress the point that let's get Granville open, and when we get Granville open, we can discuss some of the other concerns that she has about fishing moving forward. So all I can say is it's very disappointing that we find ourselves where we are. We enjoyed pre-Brexit a really easy way of exporting, but since Brexit it has become increasingly challenging. And I believe it's also becoming increasingly challenging now for UK exports into France. So,
thank you, Minister.
Sorry.
No, just watching the time, I think we need to move on, but thank you on that, and we'll move to Deputy Curtis.
And, Minister, we'll take a bit of time talking about planning reform and the Bridging Island Plan. So, starting with a look back to our July quarterly hearing, we discussed the Industry Partnership Board and delays surrounding the publication of its annual report. Is it possible to get an update on the Industry Partnership's annual report, whether it's published or where we are on the timeline for that?
Okay, well, I'm going to have to ask Kevin to help me on that one because I'm not cited. But what I can say is that we have decided to maintain the membership of the board until the 2 years is up. I mean, there was some sort of discussion about we might change, but I would be remiss of me not to take the opportunity to say how well and pleased I am with the way the board has worked. There is no question that the industry, through this particular type of representation, have been really grateful, and they've done some really good work, and I feel that the input that they're having to planning reform, to the planning department, to policy, to all aspects has been really, really useful, and it's proving to be a really good resource for us. We've increased the frequency that they meet. I think we thought originally we'd meet quarterly. I think we're meeting, is it bi-monthly now, or so? Certainly more frequently. But they input on any number of different subjects, and I may as well say it because it'll come out in next week's fortnight's debate. You know, for example, they have contributed a paper to me on the parking standards proposition that the Council of St Heliers, because they are concerned about the effects on property prices by being made to add parking to any. So
I can offer the timings in terms of the annual partnership board. So it's just going through a final sign-off, so it's imminently to be published. It's just going through final sign-off.
Okay. It was close to that period, I think, back in July. So are we looking at because I feel like all the good stuff you're talking about, Minister, hopefully will be reported on in an annual report, and then this panel and obviously the public can understand the work going on behind the scenes. So how close are we to getting that?
We're close.
We're close.
I deliberately, I've always said I will go to the partnership board as often as they want me to, and I will, and I think they appreciate my attendance. I haven't been very recently, but I will go when they ask me. But I deliberately don't get too involved. The idea is not for that. I don't want to be influencing them. I want them to be coming forward with ideas from outside of the department, and industry ideas and developer ideas and stuff, and suggestions for how we can improve. So it's not for me to be sitting there looking over their shoulders, which is why I'm not quite as well sighted. But if Kelly says they're close, they must be close.
Okay, and where does the final sign-off on that then lie? What will make sure that we've got a clean passage? Because I think we are quite keen to see written down, obviously, how this works and how it's feeding into planning reform. So where will that final sign-off take place to know that we can then get a copy?
So it is waiting for sign off for the chair and the vice chair of the board, and then obviously for the minister's site and signatory before publication. But we are very close.
We're at that point. Okay. Looking to work on the next island plan, we held a standalone hearing with you, Minister, about this on the 23rd of July. And I think we'd be quite keen to understand what work has progressed specifically around any planning for the next island plan since we last spoke.
Well, I'm trying to think, but off the top of my head, I suppose the piece of work we might not have told you is that the policy team under Kevin is now up to full speed for the first time in quite some time. In fact, I believe pretty much across planning generally, we are now up to speed. We've got more. It's not sort of immediately recent, but we've got we've got a planning manager, we've got an enforcement manager. The workload of Andrew Marks has reduced. Our overall manager has reduced because of that. So that's fantastic. Everybody can get on with their jobs. I'm trying to think which pieces of which SPGs we're just thinking about starting the west of Ireland. We have concluded St Saviour's Hospital has gone out. I'm trying to think of the other bits of planning reform.
We will get to SPGs.
The phase 1 GDO work is progressing fast. We're out to consultation, and the expectation is the first part of the permitted development, general development order, will come in fairly quickly, but certainly before Christmas.
We do have some more detailed questions on those topic areas because those are obviously. Did you?
Residential space standard SPG.
We will ask about the residential space standards SPG as well.
Yes, it's interesting. It's interesting that you asked me about that because I was reading through some notes quite late last night, and I thought, oh, residential space standards, where are we? I mean, I know what I'm going to do. I just haven't got round to putting it on paper and putting it to making the decision.
Perhaps if I can pick that one up, a bit like the industry partnership board.
Save me from myself.
So I think I know Deputy Coles has been very patiently awaiting the outcome from this. And as the Minister said, we've been a bit stretched for resource. We are now back in a position where we have some resource in the team. So a report has been prepared. There's a draft report which we need to review and then place in front of the Minister. So that should be tabled back in the Assembly imminently. So that is coming, Deputy. So apologies for the time taken for that to be progressed. But perhaps if I can just return to the sort of scoping work for the next Island Plan review. As the Minister's already touched on the West of Ireland planning framework, that was identified as a key proposal in the last Island Plan to start to explore the possibilities of development opportunities in the west of the island. So we are preparing the terms of reference for that piece of work, and we'll be engaging with members in relation to the scope of that work. So that's a key issue. Another piece of work that the Minister has commenced and that we're doing in partnership with Jersey Water is to look at the issue of the resilience of the island's water supply. And you may have seen the publication recently that Jersey Water made of their water resource and drought management plan, which looks at some options for increasing the resilience of the island's water supply. So we're doing a piece of work to examine the options that they're putting forward.
I said all along that I hoped during my tenure that we would come up with some definitive answers to where we would be going in the next 10, 20, 30 years with water resources. Certainly the very short-term answer is obviously that we're going to increase the capacity of the desalination, or Jersey Water are going to increase the capacity of the desalination plant. And so that's the first the first step that we take. But moving forward further, and certainly before the next island plan debate, I'd like to think we will have made the decision about how they're going to increase the resource further from that. And I think it will probably come down to an increased capacity of an existing reservoir, a new reservoir, or recycling. And I have to say, at the moment, certainly there's an amount of discussion about the potential to recycle water.
Okay, brilliant. The reason we'll touch on all the different areas is because planning reform and obviously the new island plan is quite a broad topic, so we will probably dive into individual ones as we go. But one area you mentioned, Minister, about making sure work continues was that some parts of work for the next island plan will be able to be done under PERDA, or the period, or pirogue, whichever one we're calling it now. Is it more understood what work can be done under pirogue? Perhaps do you or Kevin have a kind of an idea what work you were talking about pursuing
I
during
think the
that period?
challenges of PERDA are more so for politicians than they are for civil servants, and certainly Kevin and his team are acutely aware of what will be required for the next island plan, and there will be any number of work streams which they're able to continue to work on. The important thing is if there's a decision to be taken at the end of that work stream, that decision has to wait until the minister's in place and can take it. But there's I don't think there's anything, Kevin, that you have to stop doing while politicians are in PERDA.
No, I think that's right. In terms, well, obviously the minister is sort of incumbent on taking any sort of major policy decisions, but I think as the minister has suggested, we will continue to do that work that's necessary to work on the potential scope of the next island plan review and to identify the key issues that the next plan will need to address. And then clearly that will then be an issue for the new Council of Ministers to determine how they want to address those issues and to what extent the plan might require review. So we will continue to, we have informal discussions across government looking at various challenges around key bits of infrastructure, for example. We are proposing to formalise those discussions with the establishment of some form of shadow programme board for the next island plan review to help those discussions across government so that government can identify its requirements and talk to us about those so that they recognise that there is a planning implication and we can properly reflect that in the plan. You know, we're all familiar with major bits of infrastructure that have come along that have been outside the scope of the plan. Hospital, the Kennevet School, government needs to work better together to identify what its requirements are in advance of the planning framework being put together.
We've mentioned water, but the other one, of course, which will be really important, will be waste. And we know the energy from waste plant is starting to head into the second half of its useful life, and I'm sure that there will have to be a discussion about waste, not just solid waste, but liquid waste as well. That may involve implications for the next island plan debate, depending on what we want to do. Certainly for myself, and this isn't something that Kevin might do in PERDA, but I see the next island plan as really important under a number of issues, but light industry is one, and providing areas of the island for light industry, the parking of commercial vehicles, all sorts of things to do with the economy and business in the economy, and I think that's going to be a vital part. Certainly that's going to be something any minister will have to do work on, I hope, before the next island plan debate.
You may guess we'll be touching on the economy. To go back to another area you mentioned, that forms an evidence base, which is a supplementary planning guidance. Very briefly, you mentioned engagement on the West of Ireland planning framework and that you'd engage with members. What's the timeline for that?
Well, we're right at the beginning of this work, but from my perspective, and I know from the perspective of the Economic Minister, West of Ireland planning framework is going to be a really important and potentially exciting piece of work to get done. We're scoping, I suppose, is the best way of saying it at the moment, but we intend to get started just as quickly as we can. Certainly, I talk to the Economy Minister about this on a fairly regular basis, and we all accept that it's a big piece of work. It needs to be done properly. It will be scoped, and we will get on with it because it has big implications. Obviously, the airport, the area around the airport. We've got our secondary, primary location at Kennervay. We have we have one proposition, particularly from Deputy Miles, coming to us quite soon concerning Kennervay Precinct and the West of Ireland planning framework. But we also need to make sure that the areas around St Peter's Village, St Wan's Village, and other potential sites are all considered, because it needs to be done. And I know, as I said, it may well be that there's some hope for the light industry in that. I don't know.
But can members expect to be engaged in 2025 and see work progress in 2026?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I would think so. If we're scoping now, I would very much hope. Resource. I don't know how many times we're going to talk about resource today.
That's fine.
We've struggled with resource financially and physically. The physical side is back up to speed. We now need some money to start working on some of these other projects.
Okay. I've got quite a few questions and not much time, so we will have to
be. We
will be succinct. One more SPG that I do want to raise was one that came out of the blue, which is a request for guidance on the Aviemore site. How does that fall into your prioritisation, given the level of backlog you've had?
I can't say it's a high priority for me, but in fact, I'm not even quite sure where we are. I think we've progressed it. I don't think it's close to publication.
We have a draft guidance note which we're reviewing before we place in front of the Minister for the Minister's consideration. And you'll be aware, Deputy, that came around as a consequence of the proposal to dispose of the site. So the idea about the planning guidance is to address some of the planning risks, so that any developer of that site has some clarity around the planning parameters within which the site ought to be developed.
Okay. Moving on to some of these work streams of the planning services reform, we obviously know that a consultation on 3 areas went out and concluded on the 9th of September. Could you share any details on those 3 work streams from that consultation?
I'll have to give you the details, but certainly, as I said earlier, the General Development Order work that we're doing falls into 2 parts. The first part's very straightforward, and I've got the details here somewhere, but I won't bore you. I think it's non-controversial, and I think we can get those results back, and I can make some changes very quickly. The second part of the GDO is a little bit more out there, if you like, a bit more controversial maybe, and we need to see the results, and I need to take some further decisions. But you got anything to add there, Kevin?
Yeah, just to say that we're, as you've said, the consultation closed at the beginning of September. We're working through the feedback that we've had, analysing all the responses and looking at the implications of some of the comments that have been made. We had 2 types of responses. People filled in a survey form, but we also had written responses as well. So we're just collating all of that information, reviewing it, and then we'll discuss with the Minister the changes that he wants to take forward in light of the consultation response.
Okay, of course, that was so the General Development Order had the 2 parts. You're still feeling the first element will be quite uncontentious and can act perhaps in 2025?
Yep.
And likewise on appeals, is there any update that you can provide on the review of appeals, noting that will probably need legislative change?
Yeah.
Well, appeals is going to be it'd be very interesting to see the responses to the consultation, because as with all things planning, one person may see it as a benefit to change the system in a particular way, another person will see the complete opposite depending on the circumstances. But I was Minister when we started the current appeal system that we have. We do have some changes to make. We've identified some little areas where we haven't got an appeal where we should have. But similarly, I'm going to be interested to see whether people feel that we've actually gone too far, and whether there's an appeal for just about everything you can do these days, and whether there should be a point in time where we say, actually, no more appeals, we go to a decision and that's it, and we move forward. So the appeals consultation will be interesting to see, because we started off thinking 10 years ago we would have hundreds of appeals. That didn't happen. 3 or 4 years ago, I think we started to see a build-up in the number of appeals for a number of reasons, but now, and certainly this year, the number of appeals is starting to fall off, and that's, I believe, as a consequence of the hard work the team have put in to turning to the planning reform. We have a system now with pre-application advice where the right advice is given before the application goes in. Far more applications are being approved, and because they were working with the applicants to come to the right conclusion, the application goes in, most of them get approved. Consequently, we have a far smaller number of appeals starting to come through the system, which to me is great.
Okay.
Just on the issue of timescales, clearly the permitted development rights are set out in the general development order, and clearly the minister can amend the order by ministerial decision. Yeah. So those changes can be given effect quite quickly in terms of the first stage of that work. If there's work that the minister wants to take forward in the second stage, we'll likely do some more consultation on those specific changes before the minister might consider making a second round of change to the GDO. So that's the GDO work, if you like, the permitted development right consultation. The other elements were appeals, change to the appeals process, and also the plan making process. They were the other parts of the consultation. Any change related to those would require primary law change, so that's change to the planning and building law, and that would require obviously lodging in the Assembly and approval of the Assembly. So
that will be an important decision, because if we are to go back to doing island plan reviews like we did in the past, that is a huge piece of work which involves a big resource financially and physically with staff. If we're going to change that, we need to know, because certainly one of the first decisions that our new government are going to have to make later in 2026 is what are they doing with the next island plan. As we all know, Bridging Island Plan was supposed to be coming to an end right now. We should be going into a new island plan, but we have the ability, because of the way the law was phrased, to continue, and we are continuing until we have the information. But nevertheless, the new government will have to make a decision on the next island plan review pretty smartly.
Yeah, the panel would like to, I'm sure, be kept up to date with all that work. Sure. I think we'll have to, on that part, finish, and no doubt we would like to have, if we could, advance sight of changes to general development order, given that they are quite wide-ranging.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
One last area that is important to touch on is the kind of joint approach yourself and the Minister for Economic Development issued in September on the economy, and we really would like just a brief update as to how that's come about, and ultimately how your team in regulation are looking at changing, or what the impact on regulation is for the assessment of planning applications following both the joint approach and the planning hub run by Jersey Business.
Okay, I'll be as brief as I can, but I think we go back probably 12 months, maybe a bit like, when I felt that the responses on the economic side for large applications was very short, sweet, didn't have much detail, and didn't give the ability for those making the decisions, whether that was officers or whether that was the planning committee. There wasn't enough information on the economic response. So I said at the time I wanted more input, and that is what happens. We've worked with the economy department, Jersey Business, and we've come up with a scheme now whereby there is the ability for applicants to for big schemes that affect the economy, to put forward a proper representation for the economic effect that application could have. I don't believe there's a great deal of difference to what actually happens inside the regulation department, because what we've done is created a system whereby the application now comes forward with the environmental impacts, the ecology impacts, all the impacts on everything. But it now comes forward, hopefully, with a proper economic impact assessment, if you like, not want of a better phrase, so that the decision maker can see everything in the round. We haven't changed any rules inside policy about how the economy is valued. All we're doing is we're creating a process where a proper scheme can be put in front of the decision makers, so they have a real proper understanding of the potential benefits to the economy. I don't know if there's anything more to say.
Perhaps there's just one other additional element, and that is for larger schemes. The work that the Minister's talked about with the Economic Development Department is such that they would now look to provide some sort of critical appraisal on submissions for larger schemes, so that decision makers will clearly have the applicant's view of their proposal and also some critical appraisal of that from economic development as a consultee, effectively. So similar to the comments that you might get from colleagues in historic environment or natural environment on heritage impact statements or ecological statements.
And that I think what's key to understand is that the expectation is that the critical appraisal could be negative on applicants, or it could be to say that insufficient evidence has been provided, and that then acts as a consult into regulation. So you're not expecting the economy department to come forward always singing glowing praises if an application doesn't necessarily provide the detail and the rigour behind it.
That's right.
Okay.
So, it's simply there to make sure that you as decision makers are best placed and you've got as much information, quality information in front of you for you to actually make an informed decision.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask?
Oh, yes, of course.
So one of the biggest challenges we face, especially with the planning committee, is about proof of redundancy. So is this intended that this hub will also make comment about whether an application which is trying to have a change of use from one aspect for varying scales with the economy, you mentioned light industry, we obviously have varying hospitality, we have storage requirements and changes. Is it the hope that this hub was also going to make comments on whether they believe that their proof of redundancy has been proven to suggest a change in the economics?
Well, I've not heard that mentioned, but it could well be that they could. But discussions I've had over the years, over the months, in fact, even in the last week, over proof of redundancy for change of use are interesting. And it always occurred to me, and I did try sort of 10 years ago to say when an application comes in for an agricultural shed, for example, to be a change of use, to make sure that that agricultural shed had been advertised at a rate which was the market rate for the industry. And that, I suppose I use agricultural shed, could be anything. But the important thing for me is to make sure that whatever the use class is for said structure, it needs to be advertised at about the right rate for that particular industry. Otherwise, you get to the situation where the owner advertises it at twice the price of what it should be. He gets no response as he comes to us and said, I've advertised for 6 months, I've got no response, please can I have change of use? I think we need to be a little bit cleverer than that, a little bit tougher. Certainly moving forward, it's something we could discuss with the Partnership Board, it's something we could certainly discuss, like you say, moving forward with others, and it may well be Economy Department as well. But I think change of use is an interesting one, but I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that before we give change of use, I'm trying to pick my words carefully, but before we give change of use, we are absolutely satisfied that there isn't a market demand for the use class that structure is specified for.
Thank you. Thank you. Conor Tarver. Change.
Yes, my question now relates to the complaints process, if I may. And particularly as regards statutory nuisance, the panel understands the government has used what's called the Clapham Omnibus test of reasonableness, whether an ordinary unreasonable person will be affected in relation to statutory nuisance complaints. For the benefit of the public, how do you determine the appropriateness of this test for complaints of statutory nuisance in the context of Jersey?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the Clapham Omnibus test is it's sort of acquired that name, but it wasn't specific to Clapham and it wasn't specific to omnibuses. All is meant by that is to say that the statutory nuisance law has to affect the average person in a particular way. And this is one of the challenges we have with some of the cases where we have had to investigate statutory nuisance in recent months. Officers who are absolutely trained to do this work have to be satisfied that the average person would be adversely affected to a certain level. And Kelly will probably use the right words and terminology. But this is the difficulty we face. statutory nuisance is a criminal offence, and consequently, because it's criminal, the bar to get to it is particularly high and particularly difficult to attain. And we can talk about civil nuisance in the future, but I don't know if you want to talk about
I can
statutory.
answer the Constance's question specifically for statutory nuisance. There's two key areas, and if you allow me just to cover that. So broadly, the criteria to define statutory nuisance is that the nuisance itself has to substantially interfere with the use or enjoyment of land and by an act or condition, and that act has to be at which a reasonable person could find that harmful or offensive. And secondly, that has to be prejudicial to health. So the act has to be considered injurious or likely to result in a detriment to health, and that can include physical and mental well-being as well. The thresholds, as the Minister describes them, and as there's been lots of discussion of what are the thresholds, so the thresholds, again, is a test of reasonableness for a reasonable person. That is the average, and the Clapham Omnibus is the point that we're coming to. So the factors have to be essentially across the range of frequency. So how regularly does the act and the condition occur, and what's the regularity of the occurrence, and how does things like atmospheric conditions affect that frequency? Duration, how long a particular issue continues uninterrupted. So breaks is, in terms of the duration, is a factor. The offensiveness, how pleasant or unpleasant is perceived by a reasonable person and not someone with hypersensitivity. The intensity, so how objectively intense the issue is for a reasonable person. So that could be decibel levels, or it could be the perception of odour. And then the location, so that's really important. Nuisance is generally not considered an in-passing. It has to be particularly for the enjoyment of a property and at a single point. So there has to be evidence from those single points. So consideration is given to the location. So we have described that in our odour report, which is tabled for the States Assembly. It's very, very specific, and those are objective measures that trained environmental health practitioners spend many years in being able to assess against those factors of threshold. But ultimately, it has to come down the nuisance itself to the substantial interference of the property and to be injurious to health. And those are the key criteria that are defined at that level. So when we talk about a level, when we talk about a threshold, those are the key criteria. It is complex. It is a difficult area of science. And I hope that the odour report that the team produced, you can see, could withstand up to international best practice in terms of the assessment on statutory nuisance.
And the difficulty with odour, particularly out of all the nuisances that you could have, the difficulty with odour is that the best way to decide how strong it is to use your nose. We can have detectors which will tell us all sorts of stuff, but they are not able to do smell in the way that we will smell with a human nose, which is why it's so important that our officers are, they are qualified and trained in the way that we have to do that work. We have air detectors around schools for particulates and things like that, but when it actually comes to odour itself, there aren't machines that can do what we need them to do and stand up to scrutiny when it comes to the evidence that those machines produce.
Yeah, well, thank you both for that. The term Clapham Omnibus Test, that was used by the complaints panel, I think, and they also referred to the site as you just described. There were other considerations which should have been applied, taking account of the context of the site, and saying that comparing London to the country might be somewhat different. So you are confirming that, yes, that is the location of the smell or noise might be considered more injurious in some places than others?
I can answer that.
Yep.
That's it. And I think the Minister's response to the Complaints Board is that we refute the interpretation of the Clapham Omnibus Test that the Complaints Board made. It is not a reference to a geographical location, and it is not in reference to location as I described just recently. Clapham Omnibus is just an analogy. It's only a way in common law, it's a label in terms of the test of an average or reasonable person. Now, separately, you can apply locational context to certain odours. So there is a context in which, in the middle of St Helier, there'll be a context to certain noise, decibel levels, certain smells, dust that's expected within a built-up area, as opposed to smells, noise, and other factors in a rural area. So there is a contextual argument to be made, but that is distinct from the use of the analogy or the word Clapham omnibus, which is only for a reasonable average person test. Does that make sense? So in terms of the context, yes, there is a contextual perspective as well.
Well, thanks again. And just for the record, or as an aside in a way, I had a complaint in the last 24 hours about a smell which might one reasonably expected in a rural community. And again, your argument would be that's what you perhaps sort to expect if you live in a rural community.
Yes, I mean, anybody who lives in the countryside, I mean, some of us live close to dairy farms, for example, and that will involve the smell of slurry at times. And I mean, only yesterday driving through St Martin's, you know when dairy farmers are out spreading slurry. Similarly, some silage smells are not fantastic. In the not too distant past, we had the smell of rotting cauliflowers in the middle of winter when we had a massive cauliflower industry in Jersey. And, growing crops comes with smells sometimes, and keeping animals comes with smells sometimes, and that's part of being in the countryside. I know there will be a challenge to say this is not a countryside smell, but it's a smell that comes from growing crops.
I think the key aspect for that, Minister, as well, is, again, frequency, duration. So if it breaks up, if it's not persistent, if it wafts with atmospheric conditions, there are a whole range of tangibles that the expectation of an average person for smells, as the Minister described in the countryside, is considered reasonable. All of those factors have been demonstrated in the evidence provided with the odour report.
Can I just, you were saying about the odour report, maybe I've missed it. Has it been published?
It is embedded within the Minister's response to the Complaints Board. That was tabled for the States Assembly. Yeah. And we have also sent a separate PDF copy to yourselves ahead of this meeting for your reference.
Okay, thank you.
On the same thing, the question I have here is about as to whether the tests used to assess odour and noise remain relevant, given that they have been used for decades. I mean, you are saying that, I don't know what's in the mouth, how relevant you consider they are, and should there be, or can there be other tests introduced which might be more relevant to today's market?
I've said it in the States Chamber, and if I haven't, I've certainly said it publicly, and it will be the subject of something that I address it in the not too distant future. But we have the statutory nuisance, and I've explained about the height of the bar to get over. And if you were in the UK, you would have another avenue to go down, which would be civil nuisance, which is not as difficult to attain. We do not have that legislation in Jersey.
Coming on to that, yes.
And it would be my intention, if I get the opportunity or whoever, but certainly it's my view that that work needs to be done. And if I was in a position to do it, I would certainly be looking to legislation and law drafting to see whether we need that in Jersey. But it does appear to me that is a gap in our legislation that we should look to fill, especially given the difficulty that we have with statutory attaining the bar for statutory nuisance.
Yeah, just to clarify, so that the high bar test you refer to, essentially because it is a criminal
absolutely.
sanction.
You go away from criminal, come back to civil, you find that the amount of work your complainant needs to do, the difficulty of getting to a result is greatly reduced. I don't know, probably unfair to ask you about civil law.
I think you've described it quite well. It's obviously in the UK that legislation is far more mature, and so there are gaps currently in the nuisance law that we have here. We have said for a number of years that we would like to pursue amendments and changes to the statutory nuisance law, but again, that's got to come within new government's priorities, essentially.
Okay, well, thanks for recognising that, but it's not, from what you say, it's no question to be done in the present term. Or even
I don't
started,
think
or even
so.
planned?
I mean, I imagine
a
that
whole
it
review.
would be quite a big piece of work.
It's not an amendment, yeah, sorry, it's a whole review.
Yeah, so it would be a complete review of the statutory nuisance and what comes out of that. But certainly, I think it would be fair to say that some of the instances we've had where we've been discussing statutory nuisance in the last 12 months would lead anybody to the conclusion, I would hope, that a review would not be a bad thing. And certainly it's being suggested to me officially that's something I need to be looking at. And as I say, I will be commenting on that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, two final questions on this subject, if I may. First of all, I mean, the Complaints Board did give their opinion, and you gave your response to that. How's your own feedback been received by the Complaints Board?
Obviously, they issue an official report, and we issue an official response, and we haven't had, to my knowledge, further discussion about that on the complaint itself and how it's gone backwards and forwards. Certainly you will know because of my speech in the Assembly when I finished up talking about mediation, and that's something I put in place because it was clear that we were really struggling to resolve these issues. As I said in the Assembly, Northern Leaf has changed hands. The new owners are really keen to try to find ways through these problems. But I understand perfectly that, and I sympathise with them, but the neighbours have issues and they are ingrained and they have been complaining for a long time and without resolution. The new owners are trying their best, but there's still a gap. So we've gone down this road of mediation, which I really hope everybody will engage with, and we can see if we can use that, working alongside the efforts that the department will make with enforcement notices and appeals and all that, the complications that will go. But working alongside, we're going to put mediation. We have put mediation in place. I have said I will engage with mediation when I'm requested to. I haven't been asked thus far, but I have told them very clearly I want to do whatever I can to help on the mediation, and I hope that as many neighbours, if not all the neighbours, are engaging with the mediation so we can start discussing all these challenges in a proper context where we can have a sort of a grown-up conversation about how we move forward.
Yeah, accepting that mediation might be a way forward as regards existing complaints. As to the general complaints process we have at the moment, do you consider that an alternative method, such an ombudsman, would be helpful and actually reduce conflict, which there is at the moment?
Well, it could be, but I think I'd only say that the Deputy Scott is doing a review for the Chief Minister into complaints generally, and it will be very interesting to see what she comes back with. I think at the moment, I would have to say in a personal capacity, it would look like we are moving towards an ombudsman situation, but I'm acutely aware that that will come with cost and resource and money needed, and that will be probably for the next government to decide. But complaints are important. Complaints need to be heard, but they need to be heard in a fair and equitable way where both sides have the opportunity to put forward their case properly. So anything that allows us to move forward.
Just because one point, you talk about the costs and resources being relevant to any decision going forward. Has the cost to departments such as yourselves in dealing with the present system been sufficiently taken into account in determining whether an ombudsman should be necessary?
Cost when it comes to answering complaints is not a consideration for us. Certainly, the Northern Leaf complaint, the Northern Leaf situation has had an enormous cost to the department. We have had a large number of officers working pretty much every day for almost years on this. But I don't ask questions about the cost. That needs to be done. The reason I mentioned finance is if we were to set up an ombudsman, that will come with a cost which somebody will have to find.
I accept that.
In-house, we deal with it as business as usual.
What was I getting at? In the looking at costs overall, one should surely take account of the saving of your own resources if you're not dealing with complaints in the way you are at the moment. That's what I'm
Absolutely,
getting
it
at.
would be, you know, I think we all hark after a world that would be lovely to have a department where we get no complaints. But I think anybody who has anything to do with planning and enforcement realises that when you say yes to one person, you have somebody else that you're probably upsetting. And that's one of the first things I certainly said to myself when I took on this job, was you need to accept that you cannot please everybody all the time. In fact, you can't please anybody any other time in
think
my
we all know that,
particular
yes.
job. But that goes with the territory. Yes, we'd all love to have less complaints, but I think we need to accept that whether it's a small, medium, large-scale application goes through, if the answer is yes, there will be neighbours or there will be somebody who's generally unhappy, and that's always going to be the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Deputy Ward.
Okay, so this is around PFAS and water. Did the Minister or his department work with Jersey Water in developing the new water strategy, and how were government priorities reflected in that process? I'll just split this out into 3 areas. So where does Jersey Water's responsibility for water management and planning, and where does government's begin? Is there anything the Minister believes is missing from Jersey Water's strategy which should be addressed through government policy? And does the Minister consider it's still necessary for government to develop its own water strategy to build on Jersey Water's work?
Okay, well, let's address the last question first, and it certainly had been my intention during my term as Minister to come up with a government strategy for water, and that was going to work very closely with the Jersey Water Strategy, which has recently been published. Very unfortunately, but due to illness within the department, I wasn't able to progress that work as quickly as I wanted to. But nevertheless, Jersey Water have come out with their own strategy, and I'm grateful for that. And we will need to review it, and we will be reviewing it. We will come up with our own additional bits of strategy, if you like, to add on. When it comes to many of the parts of the questions that you referred to, interaction between government and Jersey Water on strategy, but I'm thinking to myself, they are a private company. There's a Jersey Water law, and they go off and develop their strategies, and provided that it's fine, we move with them. Certainly there's been a lot of interaction in recent years between Jersey Water and the Environment Department on catchment areas, and 10 years ago now we set up the Action for what was called then the Nitrate Working Group. It's now called the Action for Cleaner Water Group, which continues to meet on a regular basis, which is made up of representatives from the whole of the countryside who work with Jersey Water and round the table to see how we can continue to improve the waters that flow into the reservoirs and the catchment areas that Jersey Water use to provide main water to us. As I said, initially that was nitrates, but in more recent past we look at every chemical which farmers are using on the land to see which ones are appropriate, which ones are not appropriate, and certain areas, particularly Bowdler-Mar, for example, the catchment of Bowdler-Mar, there's a lot of sand in the surrounding area. Chemicals move through that medium very, very quickly and find themselves in the reservoir. So, for example, at Bowdler-Mar, the industry have a number of chemicals which they don't use in their catchment area. So we work, government, if you like, work with Jersey Water and the industry to do the best we can with that.
Provide a little bit more information as
Yep,
well
so-
to the
yep.
deputy's question specifically. Sorry, excuse me. In terms of what Jersey Water has just recently released, we understand that it's not necessarily a whole system strategy. It's only a short-term piece for public water supply itself, so it's not necessarily the strategy I think that you're referring to. And the responsibilities is essentially where the company's obligations and the government begin is the Water Jersey Law 1972. And further work that we are doing with Jersey Water, obviously, is part of the water quality and safety programme, is that we have set up monthly steering groups. So we've had 3 meetings so far where Jersey Water is a key stakeholder within that group, along with ports and obviously government officials. So we are working quite closely with Jersey Water, generally in the whole area of...
Yeah, I mean, just to add very
safety.
quickly, the strategy, water strategy I would have put together would encompass not only the mains water supply and Jersey Water work, but it would also have to include wastewater and private boreholes, so that everything water would come under one strategy, because obviously everything has to work together.
Just linking back to what you mentioned earlier under the Bridging Island Plan and the work towards the next island plan, would that then be the area that you would develop this extra, review the Jersey Water strategy, but then add onto it and this whole...
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
system.
as Kevin alluded to, if Jersey Water are going to do some significant piece of infrastructure work in for the next 20, 30 years, whether that would be an extension to a reservoir or a news reservoir, or indeed a recycling plant, I don't know what that would entail, but if we decided to they decided to recycle water, it's going to be really important to make sure that input is put into the next island plan. So if they come forward with a piece of infrastructure which needs a large building somewhere in the countryside, we've already accounted for it, or at least we accept that it's going to come.
Okay. Yep. So, Minister, were you aware of the level of planned investment of 48 million by Jersey Water on its infrastructure and the resulting 15.5% increase in Islanders' water bills from January 2026 prior to publication of the Jersey Water strategy? And so, what are your views on Jersey Water's proposals?
Well, the answer was I was aware prior to publication. I can't remember exactly when I was made aware, but I was aware before it was made public. I did say that's a large increase, and of course it is in current context. A double-digit increase is certainly bigger than anybody would like. But I'm aware of the work that Jersey Water have to do, the infrastructure particularly they have to upgrade. We're trying to increase the number of mains connections, but of course they have work that they want to do, as highlighted in their strategy to do. They want to, even though the leakage in Jersey water system is very good, they want to continue with that. But most importantly, they're looking to the future. And I mean, you mentioned PFAS, but we know, irrespective of what's going to happen to the big PFAS picture, that Jersey Water intend to up the game when it comes to treating for PFAS in the immediate short term. So they will add further, I think they're going to add further carbon or something to help reduce, while we're working through the plan to go further with the levels of PFAS in mains water.
Okay, I'll come on to those in a second. So to help islanders reduce their bills, there are various ways to lower water consumption. Does the Minister believe that Jersey Water's new water strategy places sufficient emphasis on supporting islanders to do this? And what actions could the government take to further help households reduce their water use?
Well, the first thing that Jersey Water have done in the recent years is, I believe that everybody on the island now is connected to a smart meter. So I think that alone, everybody can see the consumption they're using, and I think they pay accordingly. I think, if I'm correct, I think that's the case. Yeah. Whereas in the past, you would have had a standard charge and use what you like. And of course, water will be, in the future, one of the most precious and fought over commodities that we have. It's going to be vital that we use every piece of water, every bit of water, litre of water we have to best effect. So I think metering is a really big step. Leakage is another big step. And in both those cases, Jersey Water are pretty good. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the separate, what you use your water for around your home, I think they've always been quite right in saying if you've got an outside tap and you use it for watering your garden, that should be charged at a different rate. Certainly with sustainable things moving forward, people should be trying to retain as much of their rainwater off their roofs and the sort of stuff to use for gardening or for washing or for things that they could. And in certain instances, grey water and water, we can use different water to be recycled within the homes as well. So,
got a bit of work to be done.
We do need to think really carefully about water moving forward. Jersey Water have highlighted through the work they've done that 2035 onwards, depending on the population, Jersey could be very, very tight with full water in a very dry summer. And we know, like, the climate's changing, we must expect longer and more frequent extremes of weather, whether that's wetter, hotter, drier. But we've had a dry summer. If we have a dry autumn now, we might already go into next year with a depleted picture.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move into the PFAS territory. So Jersey Water has confirmed the development of a comprehensive PFAS treatment strategy. Have you engaged with Jersey Water on the development of this strategy?
Well, I have engaged with Jersey Water on a regular basis throughout the start, since PFAS came to the fore, and obviously they're very interested because they have levels which they need to attain, and they are attaining. Currently, UK and EU levels are reached by Jersey Water quite comfortably. But they know, because I've told them, that the levels will, the accepted levels will be changing. And the PFAS panel, international panel, have indicated where I might look to go with those new levels. I've yet to make the decision. They've also indicated the amount of time I might give Jersey Water to reach a position where they can attain those levels, because it's clear that there will be some significant pieces of infrastructure needed to be put in place in order for Jersey Water to reach these new levels. So that's all accepted. So I have worked with them very extensively. One of the additional challenges they have had when we talk about the resource and have we got enough water in Jersey, one of the problems they've got is some of the water that we have in Jersey is contaminated with PFAS to a level where they can't use it currently. And the board that we've set up and the steering group that we set up are specifically starting with the Port Moche area to see how we can clean up that water supply.
I'm going to just stop you just there on exactly that point, because so my question really is why are the public being asked to foot the bill when in fact the ports of Jersey are part responsible for the shortage which we've been discussing here? Shouldn't the ports of Jersey bear the cost of securing alternative water supplies and or fund the removal of treatment of PFAS in our water sources, not islanders? Shouldn't there be a sort of principle around polluter pays be upheld? Will the government itself be required to contribute funding towards the clean-up? And if so, where would the funding come from?
Well, Kelly's keen to say something.
Yes,
Point of
yeah.
clarification is I don't believe Jersey Water's increase includes funding for a new treatment facility for the PFAS remediation. So I don't think it is the case that Jersey Water's increases are inclusive of
No, absolutely not. The 15% increase does not include PFAS.
It includes a small amount for an interim measure.
Yes, it may include that short-term
But it is
measure that I was
not
talking
the
about
long-term
increasing.
funding strategy.
yeah.
So it is not the case that that increase is inclusive of the cleanup of other water to bring other streams on there.
Okay.
And nevertheless, yeah.
But somebody must be paying for
The other thing we could
clean-up.
say, and I'm sure we can argue around the houses on this one, but of course, yes, ports are responsible now, but of course, ports took over the airport from the States, and this problem was predating ports. And of course, the other issue, of course, is that ports are 100% owned by the state of Jersey, the Republic of Jersey. So it's you could say it's a ports problem. I would like to think upon it as our problem, and I think it's incumbent upon us to work with Jersey Water to see how we're going to finance that. Jersey Water's a private company. I accept exactly the point you're making. Yes, the states have a shareholding in it, but it is, for all intents and purposes, a private company. Discussions will have to be had with them as to how they are going to finance this PFAS infrastructure, which they will need to put in. The Chief Minister has in the past indicated that he wants to see if he can find a way to help Jersey Water with that. Quite what he means by that, I'm not sure exactly, but it may be in the form of long-term loan or low-interest loan or something. But we're not at that stage yet, and certainly as Environment Minister, it's not for me to tell Jersey Water how they finance their company.
Sure.
My interest will be on, this is the PFAS level that I'm going to want you to attain, and this is the amount of time I'm going to let you to get to that point. You need to go away and talk to the shareholder or talk to the Treasury Minister or talk to, that's not my concern. My concern is that's the level I want. This is when I want it by. Please go away and make it so.
Okay, thank you. So can the Minister confirm, this is on the subject around the plume area, has there been any leaching out into the wider water network?
Well, we started with a plume area, as we all know it, and we had the Arcadis report, which was an extensive piece of work over 20, don't know how long they took it, but certainly more
2
than
to 3
12
years.
months, because it's important with water to make sure you get seasonality into the picture, and there may be times of the year where PFAS in water moves further if there's a lot of water around, or comes in if it's a drought condition. So anyway, Arcadis came in. We have modified the area of the plume area, if you like. In certain areas, it's certainly extended a bit, and we have changed the red line. But we continue to test, and have been are continuing to test. And of course, while I'm certainly very confident the red line's not getting any wider, because we're not doing any more, pollution of water. I think it's important that we keep monitoring so we can see how things are moving. Now, there's been some discussion about Simnel Sandpit, for example. There's a large body of water there. There's been some discussion of what might happen if we filled that sandpit with sand again, or with something else. Would that disperse the PFAS further? I don't know, but all I can say is we continue to monitor, and as part of the panel work, we're continuing to monitor boreholes.
I think the key area in terms of the survey work that Arcadis did was a wider area, and the areas, how they define the plumes, obviously the area, understanding the complexities of how groundwater moves through the lower levels. So they're quite confident that that area is defined as per the report. And it's a scientific study understanding the fate and movement of PFAS through groundwater.
I think it's just kind of reassuring islanders.
Absolutely. So if I can reassure islanders that the areas around have been tested and surveyed, and it is lower levels, so it is clearly, within the whole 400-page scientific report, it is well evidenced that that is a contained,
that's great.
to that area.
So I'm sorry, I'm conscious I'm going over the top on some of this stuff, but it's just some really critical questions, really. Can the Minister tell the panel how his department is managing the concerns of islanders who are worried about the levels of PFAS and PFOS in the environment?
Okay, I'll try and be as quick as I can, because I know time's moving on. But PFAS is a global issue. It is everywhere. Jersey, however, are going to be world leaders in the work and in what we're doing. The report, the reviews, the outcomes. People will be looking to us to see what we're saying, because we're doing a lot of work that nobody's done before. So.
I can also say the Water Quality and Safety Programme has a dedicated email, and all islanders that have concerns, we have spent considerable officer time contacting them, speaking through the concerns that they have, giving them reassurances, taking tests, and anything that we can to support islanders through that. So we have had a lot of contact, and we have that one-on-one time with individuals.
I'm confident by the time we get to the end of report 4, well, I'm confident by Christmas that people will be able to look at the work we've done and see that everything is top-notch international scientific work. They will see that no stone has been left unturned. We're doing work at the moment on local food. We're talking about analysing rainwater, seawater, spray, all sorts of stuff, foam that accumulates on beaches, all the local produce that comes in from the UK. We are looking at all aspects of where PFAS may be coming from, so that islanders can make their own minds up.
And I would also add that all of those meetings are in public and are available on YouTube for islanders to be able to see as we go progress. So it's not waiting for December either. They are able to access that information every 2 weeks as these meetings are held in public.
Okay, that's great. I think I'll stop there, because there's a number of ones, but
Yes, and a lot of them, I think you just
similarly, you've covered most of those.
And just to confirm that we're on track to have that report published by December.
So the report published in December will be a second interim report, similar to the water chapters that were released in draft in August. So there will be additional chapters released in December, out for consultation as well. And then the final report will be sort of concluded by end of March 2026.
But it's important to say the December report will have the information about food, it will have information about all sorts of important things which will allow me, I believe, to make the decision on the definitive level, which we will be talking to Jersey Water about it will allow me to give them a timescale.
And that will
So
be before
while
March.
while the finished
Yes.
report will be March,
Yes.
it's very much a tidying up and making sure everything's right. There's going to be a lot of really important information that comes out in this interim report in December.
Yes. Yes. It's great.
Thank you, Minister. And that's useful because for us at Scrutiny, we have already announced we want to do a specific standalone hearing on PFAS and kind of encompassing all the things that I've discussed, and just to get that timing right to understand.
Well, I mean, I can't, I don't want to over-egg the pudding, but I'm really, I'm looking forward to it's the wrong phrase. I am waiting for this report in December. I think it's possibly the most vital part of the whole thing, because it will give the context to everything else. Water, the amount of PFAS you have in your body gets there from various ways, and water is just one. There are many, many other ways that you find PFAS levels in your blood, in your body, which is why this December report is going to be so interesting and important.
Okay, thank you, Minister. We're moving on to Deputy Coles.
Yeah, thank you. We're moving on about the climate carbon neutral roadmap. I always get acronym the wrong way. The 2025 progress report was published at the end of July. The report sets the RAG ratings for each of the policy areas, including those high-level strategic policy. The RAG status for strategic policy 1 of Jersey's net zero emissions pathway is amber, citing a risk that not meeting the 2030 interim target, the risk of not meeting the 2030 target. What specific policies and delivery gaps are putting this target at risk, and what corrective actions has been taken?
Oh, jeepers, how long have we got?
20 minutes.
Not very long. We know, okay, I'll try to be brief. We know recently we saw the official figures from 2023. We've also had recently some indicative figures for 2024. It's unfortunate, but it's clear to me that we're not moving at the speed we should do in reducing our carbon. And it is going to be increasingly a challenge. We know heating and transport are the two places we've really got to go. We've tried some initiatives in the last 18 months to increase the take-up on electric cars and electric bikes and electric vans. The cars and vans went really well, bikes not so well. But we're moving now into trying to encourage people with incentives to change their heating from carbon burning heating to electrical heating. And we've modified the incentives that we can give to do that. But the long and the short of it is we're going to have to do better still. And the Climate Council have been meeting this week, actually. And they came over, they started work Monday and yesterday, and they're going to be reporting to us after Christmas as to how we're getting on. And I'm really hopeful that they will be able to try and help guide us and steer us in some new, maybe some new initiatives, I don't know. But we're going to have to up the game a bit if we're going to meet our targets. We signed up to these targets for 2030, and we're going to have to do a bit better. I have to say I'm a bit disappointed that the numbers aren't coming down quicker. I mean, compared to others, we're in a fortunate position. You know, we didn't have to worry about decarbonising our electricity, but we do have to think harder about transport and heating. I don't know if you want to say a bit more, Lizette, quickly.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is that because our greenhouse gas inventory is 2 years essentially in arrears, the 2023 data is the most recent emissions numbers that we have to go on. And actually some of the key policies of the first delivery phase of the carbon neutral roadmap. So our incentive schemes only started in mid kind of to late 2023. So we wouldn't have expected to see the impact of those policies in full in the 2023 emissions. But until we've got that data, we won't be able to actually, be able to quantify how much difference these policies are making, which is hence the kind of the kind of abundance of caution in terms of kind of RAG rating the kind of strategic policy one as amber.
The update also acknowledges that the Climate Emergency Fund will be insufficient to fund all the policies required to achieve Jersey's carbon neutral targets. What is the current funding gap and how will it be met?
Well, I'm not sure about the funding gap, in as much as if I had the ability to say I want to do all this work and I could cost it out, I could then tell you what the gap is. But at the moment, we're working within our means, and it's important to make sure that we don't deplenish the fund completely. So we have a certain amount of money available, and we're working on the bigger picture. But the number that came out at the start of this journey was several hundred millions of pounds to get to 2050. And as hard as I couldn't encourage other changes in the budget to increase the income to the fund more than the proposed increases in vehicle emissions, and the standard 9p on fuel. I mean, I did look to see whether I could go further on fuel, and I had some ideas on that. But that wasn't successful. The government's very keen to try to maintain prices for people on the island, not to increase the cost of living any further. So we have a certain amount of money coming into the fund. We're going to have to be very careful how we spend it. There's 23 million quid there's 23 million pounds in the fund currently, and money comes in and money goes out. But we know as we start to increase ways we're going to incentivise people to change, we are going to need more money. There's no question. There's never ever been anything other than that. We know we will need a lot more money to decarbonise the island, because it'll become more challenging as we go.
So taking these together, the risk of missing the 2030 target and the funding being difficult, do you consider, Minister, that Jersey's current net zero pathway to be credible? What assurances can you give that it remains deliverable?
Well, I can't give any assurances, categorical assurances that it remains deliverable, but there's some things I do know. The motor industry is delivering fleets of vehicles and ranges of vehicles across all makes and models, which will be electric, which will be low carbon, and my hope is that that will continue. Vehicles, we have our own plans at the moment there will be a restriction on bringing in petrol and diesel vehicles in 2030. We want to maintain that if we can, unless things change outside of the island. The challenge will be more so on the heating. But again, we are looking to a future where we want electric to be the way we heat our properties. We know the historic houses are the ones that are going to be more challenging. It's going to be up to us to find ways to incentivise those changes and it will have to be financial incentives. We need to find more money to reduce our carbon. We need to play our part in the global picture, and we have to find ways to do it.
Yeah.
Final question then, because we mentioned it in your response there about the fossil fuel boilers. The panel notes that the take-up of this incentive has been low. So what incentives have been made and improvements can make the scheme more attractive?
Well, very briefly, one could throw the kitchen sink at this. It was apparent to us that one of the problems or one of the challenges we have is that we don't have enough of a service industry to maintain, to design these boilers. So we're doing two things. We've amount of subsidy for heat pumps to £9,000 over the flow boilers, because heat pumps are more expensive to buy up front, but actually cost a lot less to run once they're installed. But we want people to go for the heat pumps, so we've increased that. But what we've done, which you don't hear a lot about, but which will make a big difference in the future, is we've engaged with the industry about skills. So we're engaging with Skills Jersey, with Highlands, with the whole of the industry, to make sure they are getting geared up to fit, to design, and to maintain these sustainable electric heating systems in houses. What I don't want to do is, as much as I'd love to, is to open the door and say, right, everybody, here's an easy and cheap way of going electric. And within 10 days, people coming back say, yeah, I want to sign up, but I can't find anybody to design a system or fit a system or maintain a system. So we've got to make sure the industry are ready. We're talking to them on a regular basis. We are really upping the game when it comes to that side of it. And once they are ready to do, then in conjunction with them, we'll find ways to increase the incentives, or if necessary, it won't just be carrots, it will be carrots and sticks. But we've got to go in this direction. But I can't force people to go knowing in my heart that the industry are not ready to take up the slack.
And Minister, just the last on that, we've talked before in hearings about utilising the Better Business Support Package to support industry with their ideas within this area of skills, but also the green initiatives. Have you seen any uptake on that within I think it's been the first year of the Better
I'm not aware myself, but we are working very hard with along with Jersey Electricity as well, and I must stress that they've been with us on this journey. But we're making associations and collaborations with industry between small business and big business and medium-sized business. So where a 2 or 3 man band, for example, struggle to do the whole job, they are able to suck in some resource and expertise from other parts of the industry to help them with that. On Friday, I'm visiting, as it turns out, I think I'm going to 4 or 5 historic old properties in Jersey where they have had these systems installed. The good, bad, the ugly, the whole lot. I want a better understanding of the challenges out there. But I can't stress enough, one of our big efforts in the last 12 months is to coordinate between the industry and private individuals and everybody in between to make sure that we understand all the challenges and that we're moving ahead in all departments together so that we don't create a vacuum that brings everything crashing down.
Thank you, Minister. And just moving on the last 15 minutes, there's a few legislative areas that you're going to be bringing to the Assembly soon. One of them is the animal welfare law. And following the conclusion of the consultation on the 8th of July, please can you provide details of how the public consultation shaped the version of the draft law that you intend to lodge?
That's a bit difficult for me because I'm not sure that I've been given that information. Certainly I've seen drafts, and I know I've asked in fact only this morning, for the very latest draft to be provided to you so you can see that. I am fully aware of what is in the draft at the moment, and I've got the list in here, the meaning of animal, causes of unnecessary suffering, restrictive procedures. I'm sure you're aware of them, exceptional measures that could be taken by our vets, animals in distress, straying livestock. There's a lot in there. I can't put my hand on my heart and say I am aware of the responses and where we made changes. And if we want, Susanna is here, and I think she could tell us how the consultees reacted.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, we didn't have a very large amount of consultation response. If I can start by saying, there was some commentaries about straying livestock, for example, and some concerns that we were asking for too much. Took in consideration, but I don't think it caused any changes. I think an important thing to say about this new proposed animal welfare law is it's very wide, but it's not very detailed. So the idea is to have a law that gives you the principles to then be able to have different orders underneath it that will give you some more detail for some more detailed subjects. So that's the idea behind it. So the law itself, it sets up the precedents and the main issues we want to control and set up the main conditions. The idea is to have proposed orders that are more specific to certain issues that we were, for example, under licensing. So the idea is to have a licensing order where we would look at all the licensing required under animal welfare law. So that's just an example of what we're trying to achieve here. But if the minister wishes for me to at a later stage share some of the responses, I'm happy to share that with the minister, and then it can be done as he sees fit.
Thank you. And I think it's mainly to ask if, we've had a briefing from your officers while the consultation was going on, and it was just to understand if from the consultation there has been any substantive changes
it
that
sounds like the reason I'm not aware of the consultation responses is it sounds a bit like there weren't any really controversial ones, and the ones that came back were fairly sensible. I mean, I've looked through this as it's progressed, and for me, some of the really important stuff is the Article 5 around causing unnecessary suffering, and then further down, the ability for veterinary or officers to get into property or to get into vehicles to access the places where there's suffering. I mean, we have been deficient in some of these, and I know Susanna mentioned straying livestock, but taking possession of animals in distress and protecting animal welfare, access to premises and stopping unnecessary suffering of animals is the important. I mean, that's the fundamental thing we're doing here.
And in our last quarterly, it was stated that there are a large number of animal welfare complaints that are received, but only a small proportion result in confirmed cases of suffering. What is the reasons for that gap, and do you propose any amendments to address this issue between the complaints and actually finding that they're suffering and going to
well, I'm hoping that these changes to the animal welfare law will come in fairly swiftly, and I'm hoping that they will address some of the concerns that you raise in that particular instance. I think you will find there have been a lot of complaints, but there's a big challenge for the vet because of or officers because of the discrepancy or the lack of power in some of these laws. We haven't had the ability to enter properties as easily as we should. We haven't had the ability to stop unnecessary suffering as we should. And my understanding is that's one of the reasons we're coming. I don't know if Susanna wants to add a bit.
So it's different because if I got it correctly, I think what the panel asked is why is there a discrepancy between numbers of complaints received and ones that actually result in any enforcement or any actual suffering. It's because a lot of the time people complained without understanding the background and the exact situation that is surrounding, the animal or whatever we're talking about. A lot of, public perception is sometimes different from reality. So there's a number of the complaints that are actually not a problem or assessed as not being a problem, independent of the current legislation. And then you have others where, the new law should help to speed processes. I don't believe we're missing or in not acting on any animals that potentially are suffering with the current law, but the new law will give us much better mechanisms to be able to act swifter and in a much more coherently. That's what I think.
And I think that goes on to my next question, because we received a letter from the JSPCA stating that in the past seized animals have been kind of left in limbo in kennels because of it's taking a long time to bring cases to trial. Are you aware of those issues, and will these amendments to the animal welfare law address this, being able to reduce that length of time?
Well, I might let Susanna answer that. I'm not aware of animals being kept in quarantine for a long period of time. Having said that, it would be wrong of me not to say that, Susanna, I've been down and visited the JSPCA quite recently, and we're increasing our working relationship with them. We're doing more with them. I think we've got a good rapport, and I'll say no more than that, but we certainly work very well with them. Have we had any cases where animals have been kept?
We haven't had any cases that I'm aware, since I've been into post. I think they're probably talking about historical cases, and there's also a difference between animals that are at GSPCA because of welfare concerns, or that they are there for any other reason. So any other quarantine or seizure taken by others than ourselves. Sometimes the police does that as well in other terms. So since I'm here, there hasn't been any issues with animals being at GSPCA for welfare reasons that we weren't able to act quickly. But I think the new legislation will allow us to act quicker in protecting the animal welfare of the animal itself, but obviously the new legislation won't speed courts. So, you have that, that thing I can't change, I'm afraid. I don't think any law can, but I think will give us much better instruments to be able to act quicker when there is a suspicion of animal welfare and ensure that our animal is no longer, suffering, no longer has the potential for suffering, even if temporarily. But I cannot obviously comment how long courts are going to decide, on a specific case. But the laws will give us better tools to deal with that for sure.
Thank you. And also the JSPCA's letter highlighted that terms such as stray, feral and wild are often misunderstood, and that the public understanding is key. Because they frequently first raise the welfare concerns, and understanding these different terminologies is quite important. So will there be accompanying guidance or clear definitions of these terms to ensure there's consistency in enforcement, etc.?
Well, again, that's one for Susanna. I mean, I just about understand the difference between those three, but I don't know if I mean, certainly we can issue guidance. It's not difficult to do that because it's quite clear what the difference is between the three, and people just need to be advised.
Yeah, we can, or we can also look at working with others like GSPCA and do some sort of comms pieces when it's required to do so. We can certainly look into that. That wouldn't be an issue.
Thank you. And you've talked, Minister, and also Suzanne, you've mentioned that this law is really overarching, and actually a lot of it will go into secondary legislation and also into ministerial orders. With the term coming to a close, can you confirm that this secondary legislation will come to this current States Assembly, or will it be left to the next?
I think it will be the next Assembly, because this law is still with law officers' law. We're still getting to the end. That we're still not in a position to lodge. We hope we're going to be in a position to lodge very soon, but we need to get this to the Assembly. We need to get it through. Then we can start working on the secondary stuff. So
okay,
I have to say, I don't think.
If I can add, there's three pieces of the secondary legislation that will have to come into place at the same time as the law comes into place. So that's the ones we're concentrating at the moment. And then there is a raft of the other bits of secondary legislation that will come, steadily. So that's the plan. Concentrate first on the three pieces that are essential to follow up with the legislation.
And do you have a date of when this will be lodged? We had an initial date, but
I pester the department on a regular basis, but we're waiting for the paperwork to come back from Maria House at the moment, I believe.
Okay. And
so we're waiting for final checks, yes, and the intention is still lodge it for the December debate, but it's currently not in my hand.
December. And just finally, because the panel had looked at the dog law, which of course doesn't sit in with you, Minister. Yep. And that is now being deferred. So we can, as a panel, look a bit further into that, and we wanted to see how it's related, to ensure that there is no gaps that can be seen within the dog law or the animal welfare law. Are you yourself looking at those issues to ensure that you feel that there is no gap? And
well, I haven't personally looked at it, but I would have feel confident that had the vet seen some gaps, given the opportunity to work either on the dogs law or on the animal welfare, that those gaps would have been filled. But I came into office thinking dogs law was mine. I started telling people I want this XL bully situation resolved. I'm not prepared to have an accident while I'm minister. And then, of course, we discovered that actually it sits with the connétable and it's under the dogs law. So while I've pressurised as much as I can, it has been a committee decision to move this forward. But Susanna's had a lot of input with them. And are we confident there's no gaps between dogs law and animal welfare?
I think what we can say is that the animal welfare law looks at animal welfare, and if it certainly fits in the animal welfare remit, and again with the ability of doing orders in the future, if there are gaps identified, that do sit within animal welfare law, they can be addressed, but if these gaps are not, don't fit within the spirit of the animal welfare law, then they would have to be looked at elsewhere.
Okay, well, I think the answer is we will get you the final version, well, a version of where exactly we are now. And if you need any consultation or discussion, if there's any gaps, let's see what we can do.
Thank you, Minister. And though we've just come to the end of our time, I was hoping just to give a few more minutes because we need to touch on the food law.
Yep.
And really, Minister, it's consultation ends tomorrow. How many responses have you received? Have you?
Okay. I've had updates on responses to the food law because it's quite close to my heart on a regular basis. And all the way through, I was a little bit disappointed that we weren't getting more responses, mainly from the industry. But as of Monday, we're up to over 100, and I think we've certainly, well, we proactively, because I've told the team, I said we need to get out there and get more responses, which is what we've done. So we've got more responses back from business, from industry. We're over 100 responses. Consultation is closed. Want to move forward. We've explained why it's taken so long to get where we are, and we need the 3 feet of the stool all to work together. We're just about there.
Yep, absolutely. We are working at pace to analyse the consultation responses as soon as possible, make any changes, and we are on track to try to lodge in December for a debate in January, or sort of early February, and we have offered a specific briefing to Scrutiny on that as well.
Great, thank you. Those were my questions to follow on to make sure that we are briefed in the future and ready to work on this.
You can be assured it's
Requested
an
a date.
absolute priority for me. This is not going to get lost before the election. A really important piece of work. I'm disappointed we haven't been able to do it quicker, but it's going to be done properly. It will be in place.
I think as well, on top of the over 100 responses, we did 3 industry stakeholder sessions, and we had about 80 to 90 attendance there as well. So we have had a good coverage with the consultation period.
Thank you. And with that, I think we should close. We've done 2 hours, Minister, so thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, officers in the room and online. And thank you, panel as well. So.
No, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.